like I'm sitting here all by myself today and everything, so welcome to The Essential. And this is going to be kind of like John Campion's mailbag, where he used to do this in his house. And he just put a curtain up and he just actually just talked to you here, the public, and hoping that there was a good fandom out there. But because everybody has something else to do today, what happened was is that I decided to go onto our Facebook page and ask some of our viewers, to send us some questions. And what we'll do is we'll kind of answer those questions. The topic today is going to be pulp heroes. And then of course, people like Ian and James, I know nothing about it. So, welcome to Essential.
She knows the lunch.
First of all, we're going to pick up what's in my bag. And, for the past 2, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, I've come in and saying, oh, yeah, I forgot to bring my books in. And, of course, today I brought them. So what I have been doing was I have been talking about the convergence. And, we're finally starting to get the second issue of Convergences out now. And, they're still only halfway through all of them. But what I thought I'd do is kind of like take a look at some of these that are out this week. We got the Justice Society and World's Finest with the 7 Soldiers of Victory on the cover, which I thought was cool. And then that also leads us into the Crime Syndicate from Earth 3. Now, what I thought was interesting about these, because again, as I said, I think that Convergence is for the Silver Age fans. I think it's for us who, remember these comics when we were younger and, love to see another adventure of our favorite heroes. And, 7 Soldiers is really a good topic for today because of the Pulp heroes. Because, Crimson Avenger was very clearly the Phantom. They didn't even try to lie. They put a fin on his head and changed his costume from blue to red, but he's clearly the Phantom. But what I thought was kind of interesting about this is that the Shining Knight, when the dome hit, he aged very quickly. Not enough to kill him, but just turn him into an old man, which is kind of like the way you would think that these older heroes would be. Ever since that Justice Society crisis event that happened in I believe it was the 90s, after History versus America versus the Justice Society, where they decided to bring in Infinity Inc., our heroes were never aging. And, and what was cool was they covered that here in this Justice Society issue, because it starts off greatly with, one more time, it's kind of like one last ride, guys. And then they go back to show that they're a bunch of old men now living in this dome city, and Adam, Kent Nelson is in a coma, Jay is visiting him, got nothing to do, walking around. Carter Hall is, gardening, but Alan Scott is still on the radio, moving with the times. But, then they show you how, Carter can't seem to connect with his son. And the son is still trying his best to be a hero, Hector and everything. And, they've kind of resigned themselves to this life. This is how it should be, not just the fact that they come out in their 40s, but, they're old men and they should just move aside. So once they have kind of like resigned themselves that they should let the next generation take over to get their powers back. And, then they got one last ride. So it's kind of like, yeah, well, should we let them take over? So, of course, they say no. Still is really, really nice catch up with them. Then this really struck me as interesting. This issue of the Titans, there's 2 Titan issues, but this one is focusing on Roy Harper and how we mostly remember that Roy lost his daughter Leon to something, and it turned him into, a harder hero. I mean, even though it didn't drop him back into, doing drugs or anything, he's now the arsenal and all this other kind of stuff. It's like this issue brings her back in a really weird way. For those who remember the Justice League, when they remember these guys, the extremists, this is Dream Slayer, the guy with the fiery head like Dormammu and all that. He goes back in time when he gets his powers back. He goes back in time and he rescues Lian from dying. And he uses her as a bargaining chip to get Roy to kill off his friends in the Titans. So Roy had a choice to make. Do you want your daughter back, or do you kill your friends? And, first he rescues his daughter. Then, what's really cool is that the Dream Slayer says, no, 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 man. He comes into his Batcave and he goes, look, I'll give it to you again, but I really want you to take these guys out. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, like, what does he really want from me? He's tempting him. But this is one of those Deuces Machina things where it's like, there's no time for Roy to actually think of a way out. But of course, he always has a way out of killing his friends and saving his daughter. So he does it again. And this time, he's about to go off on an adventure. And, it takes Donna Troy to tell him, dude, just hang back. We're heroes. Be a dad. That's what's most important. And I love that in a way, because I'm a dad. But then I get these Divergence little short stories that are going on now. And I'm bothered not even to read Divergence, But it seems like Divergence is supposed to be the sneak peek into what DC Universe is going to be. And so it seems like the Red Hood and the Arsenal are going to team up as Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So when DC does come back after they move to LA, that's one of the books that are probably coming out. So instead of Red Hood and the Outlaws, it'll be Red Hood and Arsenal, the series. Like, I really care. So what about Lian? Is Lian going to still be dead? That's the question. So, I mean, pretty much, Convergence is still... It's taking my money. It's not completely satisfying, but I guess there's some elements to it. I've been talking about it for 3 weeks now, and I just started reading Secret Wars after Ian wrote it last week, and it is phenomenal. It is awesome, and that looks like it's going to be much more of a Marvel Universe. I love how, actually, what we didn't talk about last week is that Secret Wars seems to be that it's doing the When Worlds Collide, and the two final worlds out of the multiverse of Marvel is Ultimate Universe and our 616 universe. They smashed them together, and I really loved how they killed off the Fantastic Four and the Future Foundation, because as we all heard last week, is that Marvel has dropped Fantastic Four while they're going on with this new movie series. But it was tender, it was touching, it was great. So that was cool. So the last bit of what's in my bag to lead us into the Pulp story scenario is, the reason why I wanted to talk about the Pulp is because of Mass. Now, this is a Mass 2, actually, and pretty much is that Mass 1 was kind of like picking up where Project Superpowers left off, where it's like we got, the Black Terror, we got the Green Hornet and Kato. And what's funny here is that this is the female Kato, but it's the male Kato that is in this book. But the Green Llama shows up, the Green Llama from Project Superpowers, showing them supposedly the future. And, Kato's like, dude, what am I doing with my breasts? I don't know, Kato, I don't know. And, so it's kind of like interesting. But what we got here is we got this Mask of the Red Death kind of going on here. And, the pulp heroes who are always walking a fine line of evil. We got the Shadow up here. I was going to say he's a strong component in the story, but he's deep in the shadows here, which is cool. It's just that, like, the Shadow is not exactly a happy camper. He's a real evil character, just as he was in the pulp. books. Green Hornet is somewhat of a whiner going on, and Black Terror is strong, but in the Pulp books, Black Terror didn't have any superpowers, and that's what's kind of weird because I think in Project Superpower something happened to all the heroes after they went into the urn, supposedly Pandora's box, and escaped out, and then it came out with superpowers. But so I don't know what this Black Terror is doing with superpowers. I don't know what the Green Llama is doing showing up, but it also has the Spider and Doctor Satan. So I figured, all right, I'll take a look at this and follow what's going on. So that brings us into today's topic of the Pulp Heroes. So what happened is that I was hoping that we would talk about it, but a lot of guys were saying that they haven't actually experienced pulp the way that some of us have. So I went on to Facebook page and I was asking questions. So I asked people to put in questions, and one of the first ones that came up from Midhat Khan was about the Phantom, and he was saying he was talking about how, well, in the 90s, how they brought back, the Phantom, and they tried to update him, first with the movie with Billy Zane, and then with a cartoon, Phantom 2040. Now, I looked at the clip of Phantom 2040, and I thought, oh, wow, I've never actually seen this cartoon, but it looks kind of cool, looks deep, and look like, because I remember the Friends of the Earth, like most of us do, But what was interesting is that it kind of reminded me, when I was just kind of looking at it in a retrospect kind of way, that it looked like Jonah Hex or Hex. When they decided that, well, we're going to do Phantom. I don't want to do Phantom in the 1930s because the movie didn't work, And they decided, let's do Phantom. Let's put him into the future and see what that would look like with one of his descendants, because that's what the Phantom was all about. Was that his sons kept rolling over the costume, so that made him like the ghost who walks. And actually, so when I look back at the trailer and I look back at this retrospective on the Phantom, I thought, this movie was good. This is pretty decent. And then I said, well, let me check out The Shadow then. And The Shadow with Alec Baldwin playing Lamont Crass. And then that was really dark. It was interesting. It was dark. And of course, who doesn't remember The Rocketeer? So then I was thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. I looked at these dates. So The Rocketeer was 91. Then came The Shadow in 94, and The Phantom in 96. So what's interesting is that this is like what superheroes were doing in the 90s. The pulp hero was actually taking over that decade, because if you think about it, nothing else was out, because this was before Spider-Man, this was before Blade, before the X-Men. So it's kind of like after the Superman movies were dying a death, and the Batman movies were dying. It was kind of like, well, let's go completely different. Let's go to heroes that nobody even heard of and see if we could create some interesting stories. So all three of these stories had something in common, where they actually took place in that time period. They were from the 30s, where they were created. So they were considered period films or period hero films. Now, unfortunately, the audience were kids or, young adults taking their kids to see superhero movies, which wasn't exactly the norm then as it is now, and they were kind of like, what? Thankfully, the Phantom, they decided not to go with the striped underwear, you know what I mean? And, but it was really kind of, it was cool. It was a fantasy. It was an adventure. And we were used to watching that on television, but not in the pictures. But I thought that these films actually look good when you look back at them, and what they said is that all of these films did well on DVD or VHS, Laserdisc at the time. And I'm pretty sure if you actually, put this movie up now, you probably will think it's a great movie. But at the time, nobody was interested in superheroes, just as of yet. And which is pretty much probably why Ian and James was saying that it's not their big thing. Because as we have on our page, we have kind of like a list of heroes, from the Spirit to the Rocketeer, guy called the Terror. We got Phantom Mouse, um, Green Hornet, Shadow, Dick Tracy, and then they throw in like Hercule Poirot and stuff like that. Doc Savage, Indiana Jones, and the Phantom. Now, what happened was 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Brooks Banks said, "How is Indiana Jones a pulp hero?" and it's like because he's from that time period, you know. I mean, back when Raiders of the Ark came out, that was a whole slew of these kind of like pulpish serial heroes like Tales of the Gold Monkey, Alan Quatermain's King Solomon's Mines, the adventurer, you know, the fist punching, you know, heroic man on an adventure, you know, was like the slew of films, and that's kind of like what makes up a pulp hero. The pulp heroes, you know, like Phantom Mouse, for example, running around with a mask and white tie and tails. You know, he has the gloves and he just, you know, he's a punching hero. You know, they carry guns, you know, and everything like that. Not Glocks, but, you know, and that was what made them heroic, was the fact that they just ran around in domino masks. Now, you know, so what difference was the hero then to the ones now? Now, what I thought was really interesting was the Phantom, again in the retrospective, what it said was is that the Phantom actually came out 2 years before Superman. You know, I mean, and so when you look at the characters or his supporting characters, you had kind of like a Lois Lane and a Jimmy Olsen type in that with the Phantom. Of course, he had his pet wolf and his pet horse, but you know, hero and devil and everything. But you know, it was still kind of like a man who was beyond a human. You know, there was something more extra to him. Now, let's see. Other questions. So, what we have here, we have like Steve Bolshaw, you know, kind of like was asking a question about, well, you know, he pretty much stated about how like he thought that Tarzan and James Bond were like pulp heroes. Now, you know, we had a conversation about it, and what is true is that Tarzan, you know, invented by Edgar Rice Burroughs in a series of novels, was indeed a pulp hero. I mean, like, he was indeed one that was continually made serials, movies, TV shows for, and he definitely was an iconic hero. Same as like Conan was before, you know, Schwarzenegger got along. But I mean, the debate was actually about was James Bond a pulp hero? Now, I mean, Ian Fleming, you know, was doing Bond like more like in the 50s, really, you know, to the 60s, when they started making movies out of it without to know. And it's not considered the pulp period. It's not. I mean, James Bond, even though he was smooth, he was slick, he was efficient. He didn't really follow along the same style of the pulp hero. I mean, now he also said that well, maybe he could have been like an English pulp hero. And you know, that's where I say, well, that's possible. That's possible. Now, then when we see moving down, what what happened to see was is that 1 second. So we also had a little tate around, you know, Dynamite Comics, you know, was just making a mess, and how Dynamite had come out with Project Superpowers, where you know they were retconning, you know, older heroes that were made in the 40s. And you know, I mean, it kind of jumped the shark a little bit. But then when we talked about that, we ended up talking about MLJ, who actually was making heroes all the way back to before Captain America, where the Shield was actually made about a year before Captain America. You know, and same kind of character of, you know, the strong, fortified man who, you know, went through an experiment, and Private Strong, and you know, but doesn't get his comeuppance today, doesn't get his credit for, you know, doing that, you know. But then again, is that we have all of these other heroes from the 40s that kept being retconned, you know, through the MLJ, which also was the company behind the Archie Comics. Now, what happened was, is like, you know, Archie Comics initially introduced these like pulp heroes like the Black Hood and the Jaguar and everybody. let's see, I got a whole list of these guys here. And I mean, so they started all the way back in like 1939. Amazing Boy, Black Hood, like I just said, Bob Phantom, stupid names, really. Captain Commando and everything, Captain Valor. Everybody was a captain of something, But they also had mixed the comic. They also had mixed their cartoon line or their what they called their funny books. So Archie ended up, taking over that line. So MLJ became, Archie Comics. So what was great was that like in the '60s when Archie Comics kind of returned back to their roots, and first they turned the Archie cast into superheroes with Captain Pureheart and Captain Hero and all that, but then they started to slowly reintroduce the MLJ characters who eventually became known as the Mighty Crusaders, which fantastic. I was saying to someone on like History of Comics 1970s where I was saying how it was that issue, that Superhero Digest #2, where the Black Hood is, leaping out of a second story window. And his quest is to save this girl. And she gets shot by the bad guys, because he just wasn't fast enough. And, he's driving on a motorcycle, he drives into the river and everything. And, and he just couldn't save the girl. And like he's sitting on the pier, end of the pier, and the cop says to him, snarly, hey, what kind of hero is that? You didn't save the girl. And the Black Hood looks up, and he's like, heroes are for comic books. I wanted to write after that. I mean, that to me was awesome. That changed my life, man. That issue, that line, it was just all about kind of like, what it is to be a hero, how hard you have to fight for it, and sometimes that's what they say, the journey is enough, and the Black Hood was amazing. Now, then what happened is that, so these books started to, pick up popularity, the Fly Man, whatever you want to call them, and the web. And what happened is that, DC picked up the property of the Crusaders and Red Circle, and then they actually turned it into Impact Comics, and they retconned these heroes again. So Mike Hallett actually, came on and said, hey, I love these Impact books, but like he asked me a curious question, and it's a curious question for me actually, because he asked me a question about this female Jaguar character that appeared in Impact Comics with the Crusaders, and I was like, well, hold on for a second, female Jaguar? No, there was the Jaguar, right? Who was one of the coolest characters. He had animal powers. He had this belt. Rob Hardy, I believe his name was, and then there is a female Jaguar that is in the new books, Aquaman and the Others. So he's like, no. There was a female Jaguar in the Crusaders. So I had to go look because his question really was she the first black female superhero in DC? Now I really had to go looking for that. And so when I went looking, because he said, well, it wasn't the Vixen. So it turns out that Wikipedia says that the Vixen was indeed the first black female superhero. But what happened with the Vixen was, strangely enough, even though she appeared in Action Comics in 1981, she actually was supposed to come out in 1978 in a book called Comic Cavalcade. But for some reason, the book never came out, and it was supposed to be the first solo adventure of DC's first female black superhero. So they reprinted that story, and she came out in '81. But she was supposed to have her own series, and it turns out that she's never gotten her own series since. But now we have, even though they haven't spoken much about it since, that because of the whole big success of the new DC TV shows, Vixen's getting her own cartoon series that the Arrow and the Flash will be appearing on. So I haven't heard much about that of late since they first announced that. But it turns out that there was a female Jaguar but this was 1988, this was in 2012, actually. It's like here. Um, in the New Crusaders, Red Circles came out with the New Crusaders, where they were creating their own version of the Teen Titans. And there was a girl, a black girl, who was an orphan, who was raised by Rob Hardy, the original Jaguar. And she goes to visit some friends with him, and something happens, and a lot of the original Crusaders get killed. The only surviving member is an old version of the Shield. Looking at the picture now, he looks like the way Captain America looks now, the old Cap. And and she got the belt, and she became the new Jaguar, Ivy Velez. Now, what, my pet peeve on this is how, like, even though Ivy's drawn as a black woman, and everything else like that, she is named Velez, which means she's Spanish, Puerto Rican, or something like that. So she's not, just because their skin tone may be brown and everything, she's Spanish. That's a bit different. So, yeah. So anyway, Red Circle actually, Impact Comics actually came out around the end of the '80s. So, but what they kept doing was kept retconning and retconning. So it turns out these New Crusaders came out after that. So she wouldn't be the first black superhero, Mike. A black female superhero. It still would be. Vixen, but also in looking at it, it looks like the New Crusaders actually was a teen book, and it did start in 2012, and so it doesn't look like she has her own issue as you thought. So the question was, has a black female superhero led her own comic? And the answer probably would actually be Storm. I think there's a Storm book out now. But not in the 70s and 80s. So that would answer that question. Okay, so one more. Um, right. So I thought what was interesting is that James Brookbanks, who again says that he doesn't know much about Pulp Fiction or Pulp Heroes, he actually made an interesting point. Let me see if I can read it, so I get that right. But he says, there are definite similarities between the pulp heroes and the comics now. The only difference I see is our own perceptions have changed. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, what we perceived in Pulp Fiction as flights of fancy, like Phantom Mouse and Shadow and all these characters, guys who just ran around in dinner jackets and masks, now to us seem ludicrous, right? Because yeah, dude, what's going on with that? But now, because of our modern advances to bring us back to that feeling people got out of pulp articles, um, so in 100-year time from now, the readers and descendants of comic books, will they look back on comic books as we did on Pulp Fiction? Well, I don't think we have to even wait 100 years, to be honest with you. I can't really get my kids to read a comic book. And with the advance of technology, we have like digital comics now. So a lot of people are reading on Comixology, tablets, comic book reader. And this is how they're getting their books. They don't care about the feel of the comic, the bend, the turning of the pages. They're just only looking at the pictures. When I go on and on about convergence, I'm going on about how I get this Silver Age feeling out of these books, because the artists who are drawing these particular issues, who a lot of them are, the writers definitely been around back then. It had the old look feel to it. It's not dark and gritty like, when oil painting came in and digital art came in. And, it's kind of like, it takes me back, really. It takes me back to that time. So, kids today, what are they gonna look about when they see these convergences and divergences in comics? I think all the way back to Homer, man. All the way back to the Odyssey and the Iliad. People enjoy storytelling. They enjoy the hero going on a quest and winning. So we'll always have some form of comics, some form of pulp fiction, some form of fantasy, and I think whether they're three dimensional in our hand, like holographic, you know, uh, there will always be that kind of hero fantasy. Um, I guess I guess that's all I can really say, about this. Hopefully you enjoyed going down the journey of looking at pulp heroes. I've answered some questions coming in from, the fan base, and hopefully the guys will be back next week, and where we'll be knee deep into Secret Wars. Convergence should be coming to its end. Um, but also, wait a minute. Oh, that's what it is. Before I had to go sign off, I had to talk about Legends of Tomorrow. What am I doing? That was supposed to be my main topic for today. Awesome. I gotta tell you, Justice League on TV, man, or Justice League International, with Rip Hunter being a Brit and all, it's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it wholeheartedly. I can't wait. I'm going to check out the Flash finale this week, where to answer some people's questions online, I really think that the Legends of Tomorrow actually begins in the Flash finale. I think that if you go back to the earlier episodes, I really do believe that this finale is going to be Flashpoint. We already seen in the trailers, Barry's gone back to talk to his mom. How can he not try to save her? So the big event that we see, the sky's opening and Hawkgirl is in it and all that kind of stuff. Stein, I really think that something happens, and the big disaster, of it all will be the end of Ronnie Raymond. Because that's why they're saying only Stein is on the cast list. We've already been introduced to Jason Rush, but we also have this new character, Jay Jackson. Now, to me, I think that, and I also said it on pages, I think that Jay Jackson is actually going to be J.J. Thunder from Justice Society, because we've been introduced to magic with the Lazarus Pit. So I think that Jay Jackson is going to be J.J. Thunder. I think that Ronnie is going to disappear somehow, trying to save the world from the Flashpoint, and Jason Rush is going to become the new Firestorm, because even though they've only shown us Stein's name on the cast list, they could easily just keep the kid, because I don't even know the kid's name actually, who showed up like several episodes back as Jason Rush. So that's what's going to send Caitlin over the deep end, and Caitlin's going to become Killer Frost and everything. Cisco becomes Vibe, and somehow in the mid-season finale, Ronnie will be back, because Barry will have to know that he has to go back to change everything. So I think that's what's going to happen. That's my prediction. I said it. Yeah, I said it. And when we come back next week, it'll all be over and everything. And it's been a really great year in DC on TV. So thank you everyone for watching. I'm Chase, here all by myself. All by myself.